The sine of theta is -1/8 and theta is in quadrant 4. Find the remaining values of the trigonometric functions of theta. So the first thing you need to realize is we're looking for cosine of theta, tangent of theta, cosecant of theta, secant of theta, and cotangent of theta. Okay, so we're looking for these values, and you need to know that. I mean, that's what they're asking you. If you don't know what they're asking you, it's impossible to answer their question. And they tell us sine is -1/8, and they tell us that theta is in quadrant 4. And I'm a big fan of drawing a picture. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to draw a picture. And my picture is going to be primarily quadrant 4. So here's quadrant 4, x, and this is my positive y, my negative y is this way. So quadrant 4. Okay, and here is theta. In an earlier video, I talked about how theta and theta prime were the same answer, just a different sign. And that's where this quadrant 4 comes in, is it's going to tell us what sign, positive or negative, S-I-G-N, not S-I-N-E. It's going to tell us whether our answer should be positive or negative. Okay? So, with that said, what is the definition of sine of theta? Okay? I think that's really important. Sine of theta in a right triangle is opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite over hypotenuse. So this is actually telling me that the opposite side is -1. Okay, opposite meaning it is across from theta, and the hypotenuse, being across from the right angle, is 8. Okay, so if this is 1 and this is 8, can I find the third side? Sure, Pythagorean's theorem. Oh, okay, so a squared plus b squared equals c squared. An interesting aside, this actually is not Pythagorean's theorem. Pythagorean's theorem is a paragraph. This is the algebraic interpretation of Pythagorean's theorem. He actually despised algebra. It's a little math history, and probably rolls over in his grave every time we call this his theorem. He despised algebra. This is someone's algebraic interpretation of his theorem, and it works. So a squared, we're going to call that -1. We don't know b, and we know c is 8. So we get 1 plus b squared equals 64. So we get b equals the square root of 63, which cannot be reduced. And so we just put that on our drawing. Okay, so there's our drawing. So we use that piece of information for our drawing. So there's our drawing. And then we go to, all right, what are we looking for? Because this picture will answer our questions now. So we say, okay, cosine. What is the definition of cosine? Adjacent over hypotenuse. All right, we'll go back to your picture. Where's the adjacent side to theta prime? There's the adjacent, there's the hypotenuse. So it's adjacent over hypotenuse. The answer is root 63 over 8. And there's the cosine of theta. Okay? Tangent of theta. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. Opposite over adjacent. So opposite over adjacent. It's going to be that. So I say, okay, and I always like to write it out. Opposite over adjacent. And opposite over adjacent is going to be -1 over root 63. -1 over root 63. And you've got to remember to rationalize your denominator. And so if we do that, we get negative root 63 over 63. Okay, ta-da. All right, third one. Okay, cosecant. Now cosecant is a reciprocal identity. Cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. This is easy because they gave me sine. I always tell my students, if I give you sine and you get every other answer wrong, you better get this one right. So cosecant is take the value of sine and flip it. So what's the reciprocal of -1/8? It's -8. Done. Okay. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine. Well, cosine, you've already got. It's right here. So flip this. What do you get? You get 8 over root 63. Of course, you need to rationalize that. So what do you get? You get 8 root 63 over 63. So there's your answer for secant. And in a second, I'm going to show you how to check these on a calculator, which is really cool. All right, and last one is cotangent. Cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. So I go back up and I say, what was tangent? Now, you could take this answer and flip it. But when you do, you're going to put this radical on the bottom. You're going to have to rationalize. It's a pain in the rear end. Or you could say, wait. Could I flip that? And the answer is yes, you could. Take the original value for tangent before you rationalized and flip it. So negative 1 over root 63. Flip that. You get root 63 over negative 1. And I'm going to write that, root 63 over negative 1, which is just negative root 63. Okay, so nice, simple, easy answers. So that's how we do that. And I think it works really well. I think it's a good... There's no practical use for this other than do you understand trigonometric functions and what they're finding. And what they're finding is ratios of side measurements. Now, I told you I'm going to show you how to find this on a calculator. One of my biggest complaints is students get this wrong and they have no idea why it's wrong or if it's wrong. And everything we do can be checked on a calculator. So what I want to do is I want to go down here to a blank sheet of paper and just a blank section of paper here. I told you in the original problem, sine of theta was equal to negative 1/8. And at some point in a trigonometry class, you should learn how to solve this equation for the angle theta. And the way we do that is we take the inverse sine or the arc sine, depending on how old your textbook is. Some people call it inverse sine, some people call it arc sine. Those mean the same thing. We take the inverse sine of both sides. Well, the inverse sine and sine are inverse operations. They're opposites of each other. So these are going to cancel each other out. Okay? It's kind of like if you've got a square root of 7 and then you square it, right? What are you left with? You're left with 7 because these two guys are opposites of each other. Well, these two guys are opposites of each other. So what are you left with on this left-hand side? You're just left with theta. And it equals the inverse sine of negative 1/8. Well, the way you do this is you look this up in a table. Okay, when I was a kid, we didn't have calculators. We would look this up in a table. Well, now we have calculators. And so what we can do is we can take our handy-dandy calculator here and we can actually look this up in the table on the calculator. So I'm going to say inverse sine, that's always going to be above the sine key, of negative 1/8. And if I do that, I get negative 0.7180755, yada, 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 yada. Okay? Be very, very careful because depending on what mode you're in as to what your answer is. Okay, so if I go to my mode, I'm in degree mode. What that means is this is in degrees. This answer for theta is in degrees. So theta is equal to negative 7.18 degrees. Okay, so theta equals negative 7.18 degrees. Okay, now that's important, and I'm going to show you why. Okay, here goes. Okay, let's go back to the original. Okay, let's go back to the original. They told me sine was negative 1/8. Sine of theta was negative 1/8. So I say sine of negative 7.18 degrees. And I get 0.1249. Well, what is negative 1/8? It's negative 0.125. Basically the same answer. Why are these answers slightly different? Because I rounded my theta value. Let's check our cosine value. Okay? What is the cosine of negative 7.18 degrees? And I get this answer here. What was my answer? My answer was root 63 over 8. Oops. Let's close our parentheses so that we get a correct answer here. What do we get? 0.99215, 7.99215. Same answer. So you know this answer, the exact answer, is correct by checking it on a calculator. Let's go to tangent, right? We said tangent was negative root 63 over 63. Okay, so negative root 63 over 63. And I get this answer here, 0.125988. Now, what's the tangent of negative 7.18 degrees, which was the angle I found? Notice 1259, 1259, both negative. Same answer. Same answer. Cosecant is fun. Remember, what is cosecant? Cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So if I want to find cosecant, I say 1 divided by the sine of negative 7.18. And what do I get? Negative 8. Negative 8. Isn't that amazing? How about here? We got, for secant, we got 8 divided by the square root of 63. There's the answer, 1.0079. How do we find secant? Well, that's going to be 1 divided by cosine of negative 7.18 degrees. And what do we get? Same answer. Now again, when you get out to these further decimal places, this is 0.52, this is 0.35, so they're a little different. But what you're looking at really is the first 3 decimal places. And they're identical to the first 3 decimal places. And beyond that, they'll be off because we rounded. Okay? But we can check all of these. We can check cotangent. Cotangent is negative root 63. So negative square root of 63 is negative 7.9. Okay, what is cotangent? It's 1 divided by the tangent of our angle. And what do we get? 7.937, 7.938. Very slight difference, but again, same answer. So it's a great way to check these with a calculator and make sure that they're right. I hope you've learned something, and if you have any questions, please let me know.